Good morning. Thank you for joining us here on Feast Days, Conversations in Hospitality and Feasting in the Church. This morning, I have Katie Fowler with me. She is a pastor and church planter in Denver, Colorado. Thanks for joining us today, Katie.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you. Absolutely. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah. I have lived in Denver for almost 7 years now. Previously was in Colorado Springs, but originally from the Southeast, Georgia, Atlanta area, and then Florida. I went to University of Florida and then moved out west for seminary and have stayed out west ever since. My husband, Chuck, we co-pastor together. We met in Colorado Springs, and then we have three little boys, 9, 7, and 3, and two of them are homesick right now. So we're hanging in there, Mark.
Yeah, understandably so. Yes, I didn't realize our kids are much closer in age than what I realized, but
Yeah, yeah,
three boys is that's a lot. That's a lot.
it's
You
fun.
really you have four boys, right? So
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly.
yeah. And you are both planting a new congregation as well as pastoring really a historic congregation, right?
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there, we Chuck and I pastor both. The historic congregation is called Corona Presbyterian. They have been in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Denver since 1904. They started in a garage, 11 people in a garage that's like half a block from where we live
Oh,
now.
that's awesome.
And we
Yeah.
found that out like 4 years into it. Like we're like half a block from that garage. But like a lot of churches in like city center contexts, they were experiencing decline over the past 30 years or so. And so when their last lead pastor left to take another call, he left in 2017, they really hit pause and said, we could continue doing what we're doing. We have a heart for our neighbors. We want our neighbors to know Jesus. But we actually don't think just keep doing what we're doing is the way to get there. And so they decided to plant a church, and they called Chuck and myself here to be their pastors, but to focus on starting the new church and pastoring the new church.
Yeah. That's incredible. Most churches that I know aren't thinking that way. So, was it what are I don't want to get too deep into it, but what are some of the challenges that you guys have seen with that shift of thinking, or has there been like the typical, oh, that's the way we always did it, or have people been more open
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah. That's a great question. I do think, and I don't know if this is, true across the board, but in our context, I think starting a new thing gave the freedom and permission needed for something new to happen, which sounds kind
yeah,
of obvious on the one hand, but like obviously churches take like a revitalization path. That's a
hmm,
viable path forward. But I do think in this context, saying like, no, we're not just starting a Sunday night service. We're not just doing like college young adults. Like we're really starting something new and letting a new church culture and vision and mission and leadership, all of that. I think that really, really helped. And then for Corona, like they really gave us that space. They
yeah,
didn't do a lot of micromanaging at all. Like there really was some space for me and Chuck to pay attention to our context and let something develop out of that.
yeah, very cool. So I want to talk about context because you said you've been in the South, you
Yeah.
went out west, you did seminary at Fuller, is that correct?
Yep.
And then you were in Colorado Springs before moving up to Denver. What differences have you noticed
Yeah.
between a context like the South or Colorado Springs? Maybe they shouldn't be lumped together, but
Yeah.
I would say they're more similar in my own understanding and experience. And then being in Denver, what are some of the just the broad cultural differences?
Yeah. I mean, I do lump the South and Colorado Springs
Hmm.
together in my head too.
Hmm.
Even like unintentionally, just kind of
Yeah.
doing them the same. Um, I think, I don't, there is both like, here's what I'll say. When we first moved here, I thought that it would be like, here's the followers of Jesus that we're meeting that might
Hmm.
want to help us start this church. And here's the people who are not followers of Jesus that we want to like love and befriend and be good neighbors to, right?
Hmm.
And really early on, I was like, oh my gosh, there's all kinds of people in between
Oh
that
yeah.
maybe they went to like Lutheran school when they were growing up. Like maybe it's just some sort of connection to the church, but lots of people. And that would happen where because we came from Colorado Springs, we're planting an hour north. There was a lot of connections and like friends of friends,
Yep.
right? And so we would get like someone from our old church in Colorado Springs say like, "Oh, my best friend's daughter's there. She loves Jesus. She'd be great for your core team." And then I would go get dinner with this person and they're like, "I don't know what I think about Jesus
Yeah.
anymore." Or I'm not sure what I think about the church anymore. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, there's just, so I feel like in Denver, this is true everywhere, but maybe because there's not social pressures, there's not cultural expectations,
Yeah.
there is that you can be where you are and not
Hmm.
even have to engage with the church. And people weren't like our neighbors that we would meet, they weren't like, "Oh, you're a pastor. That's weird." They were just like, "Huh."
Yeah.
Like maybe they were like, "That's cool that you're a woman." That wasn't something that fit into their maybe like existing paradigms,
Yeah.
but it was more indifferent, I would say. But just seeing how many people were just somewhere in between when it came to faith, and a lot less in those kind of maybe binary categories that I thought.
Yeah. Yeah. What was I going to ask you? uh, did it feel like people were more honest about where they were with God than other contexts? Not saying that people are dishonest about
Yeah,
it, but
yeah,
being in Atlanta, we were in Atlanta for 5 years. As you talked about, there was more social pressure just to
yeah,
be at church, and to be involved somehow in a faith community. Um, is it? I feel like we found more honesty of like, no, we're really struggling with this. We don't love this about the church, and
mhm.
whatever it may be, and then about themselves as well.
Yeah. I mean, I do think even that sense of I like say someone had past church harm or religious
Hmm.
trauma, even like that honesty, I mean, honesty in that way of, I remember someone came and they were like, "I get that y'all are trying to do something different. I
Hmm.
get what y'all are trying to do, but even singing the same songs from my previous churches is
Yeah.
really, really hard. Like I'm feeling very triggered, you know?"
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's it has something to do with context too, but even that like self-awareness
Yeah.
of what's going on internally and the freedom, the honesty to your point, to name
Yeah.
it. Like, I'm not just going to force myself to go to church when my whole body is screaming, "Get out of here," you know?
Yeah. 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 So that's one of the challenges. We're in Denver too, and that we face. But also, you guys are downtown.
Yeah.
And from what I know of people that have done ministry downtown, it's an incredibly transient place as well. Have you experienced that also?
Yeah, it like for sure, especially in the beginning,
Hmm.
it felt like we were just constantly churning over our community and
Yeah.
people be here for a season. Sometimes it was a very defined season because of things like grad school.
Yeah.
Um, but it was really hard. I mean, I think especially especially those first maybe 3 years, you know, you as the like leader or pastor, you're kind of absorbing that pain. Like
Yeah.
you're not gonna
Uh-huh.
like put
Hmm.
it back on someone. You're just like, oh, this like this relational hurt. So I think Chuck and I definitely experienced that a lot. It's settled down for us a little bit where we don't, I would say the past couple years, past couple summers, we haven't had as dramatic because it felt
Yeah.
almost like clockwork where it would like summer would hit and people's degree programs were done or they took a new job and
Hmm.
it would be this like group of people that were all kind of moving around the
Yeah.
same.
Uh-huh.
And that hasn't been as pronounced. I'm not quite sure why the shift where it doesn't feel as pronounced, but but I mean that whole idea of people in and out, that's for sure one of the big like discipleship edge type
Yeah.
things of how are we calling people to be rooted when we're not a very rooted society and not a
Yeah.
very rooted city and you know all those things.
Hmm. So the demographic of Nova in particular, does it lean younger? You said grad school and
Yeah.
people moving and transientness. So
Yeah,
what does Nova look like as a church?
it does. It leans younger, mostly I would say millennial, some Gen Z, but even that too has shifted a little bit over the past couple of years, maybe past year and a half, where prior to that, pretty consistently, Chuck and I would be like some of the oldest people in the room.
Yeah.
And we didn't want, I mean, two things were true. We did set out to try to cultivate a church and a church culture that was, designed with younger people in mind, like those who are increasingly, saying or no to church.
Yeah.
But we also wanted to be intergenerational. We didn't want,
Right.
I don't want to be the oldest person in the room.
Yeah.
Like that's, and for, some different reasons, that has started to shift a little bit where it still is majority younger, but there are
Yeah.
different generations present, which has been
Do,
really cool.
do you think that's helped with the feeling of people in and out a lot as well?
Yeah, I do think that's helped provide some stability.
Yeah.
There's more of a core that's stable, and that's been a
Hmm.
big change.
Yeah. So you guys are in downtown ish, very close to downtown Denver, really still urban core of Denver. You guys are pastoring a historic congregation, starting a new one, Nova. What is the vision and mission, and what have you guys settled in on that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we were setting out to plant, for me and Chuck, just in terms of who we are,
Yeah.
heavily influenced by N.T. Wright. Both of us sort of like came alive in our faith, really, I would say, but our ministry when we were like, oh, it's about Jesus making all things new. Like there's a bigger, wider story of restoration that Scripture is telling, and when we talk about the mission of God and the mission of the church, we're invited into that. So when we were, and that's why we call it Nova, just
Okay.
means new.
It means new.
And so N.T. Wright, some ideas from like Michael Frost of like, what does it mean to participate in the renewing work of God? So pretty early on, we settled into this idea of like, our vision is to see signs of Christ's renewal in Central Denver and beyond. And I remember one time someone said, oh, I don't really know if I like that. It sounds so passive to see signs of Christ's renewal. And we're like,
Yeah.
well, we hear that, but we are trying to emphasize Jesus is doing it.
Yep.
We're participating. We're not
Yep.
like, checked out, but the emphasis is on Jesus is doing it, and we're trying to pay attention and participate and join in.
Hmm.
So that was pretty early on. And then we said, kind of bridging some N.T. Wright and Michael Frost ideas of, well, what are those signs? What does it
Yeah.
look like when Jesus is bringing renewal?
Hmm.
So we have said community, wholeness, and that's kind of
Mm.
pulling on like, Dan Allender, people like
Yep.
that, like wholeness in our own stories. Community, wholeness, beauty,
Yeah.
justice, and then worship. Hearts coming
Justice and then worship.
alive. Worship.
Okay.
So that was pretty
Yeah.
early on, really defining what we're trying to do as a community. And then another part of, I think, who we are, who we feel called to be, is
Yeah.
encapsulated in our mission, which is inviting people to enjoy life with God, which
Yeah.
is really getting at that, like the with God in the midst of my ordinary life. That's where I'm going to see renewal playing out.
Yep.
And this idea of like, I'm actually invited to enjoy. Like,
Yeah.
it's, I think, we've talked about before, like some of those like performative ways we've learned to be with God, or what God is requiring of us to lay those down and really try to embrace what it means to be beloved children.
Yeah.
And from that like secure, attached love
Yeah.
of God, then I can actually live life with God.
Yeah. How's that reshaped some people in their understanding, or their experience of church, or their experience of you guys as pastors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think right now at Nova, roughly speaking, let's just say roughly speaking,
Sure.
probably like a third of our community that's exploring faith, that's at the beginning stages of their journey, maybe a third that are either actively deconstructing or actively reimagining faith and church. And then
Yeah.
let's say there's like a third that are mature, I'm a follower of Jesus, in that place. And I think for every person, like wherever they might be in that, I've seen the ways that this sort of like the kindness of God leads us to turn around.
Yep.
We don't change because we grit our teeth. We don't change because we shame ourselves. We change because of the secure love of God. Like that's where
Yep.
transformation happens. So wherever people are, if we're giving a picture of this God revealed in Jesus to those who are exploring faith,
Yeah.
if we're giving space for people to process where they're at, and maybe it's past religious trauma, maybe it's questions about the church in America, whatever it is, if we're just saying like, it's okay. Like we will come alongside. You don't have to rush this process. Like there's a kindness. I think I keep saying that word, but
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
kindness. And then I've seen mature believers be like, oh my gosh, like I'm noticing some patterns and how I've been relating to God that are really like, if I dig down,
Hmm.
more about what I need to do, that I'm really like a tool in God's tool belt and I can be useful to God. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
across the board, I've seen people respond to the language we use, our own and our leaders, that sort of like attuned presence we want to offer
Yeah.
someone. Um, we can hold like maybe if we're anxious, like so especially when the first few years when you're just like, can people just show up on Sunday? Like can people just
Yeah.
show up, you know?
Uh-huh.
And like oh my gosh, like I mean, like so many like anxious. I'm just like, it's okay, Katie. It's not about numbers. You know what I mean? Like I had to constantly do that, but it's also like I'll do the
Hmm.
constant churning and what's this anxiety coming? Where's this
Yeah.
anxiety coming from? I'll do that. So I can say like, yeah, it's okay. You can take your time. Like you don't have to feel pressure
Yeah.
to be here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It is different. And what comes to mind for me is like, as you use the word inviting rather than attracting. So there's
Yeah.
this relational thing there, but there's also, you're really putting the ball in the other person's court
Yeah.
of if they're going to come or not. And then it really sounds like the metrics that you've chosen are different than maybe normal church metrics of getting people there and all of those things. So how has that been for, I mean, you said you're managing your anxiety and are people going to show up? I've been there.
Yeah.
So what does that change been? Has there been a freedom in that, or does it feel just still like a lot of pressure happening?
I think on the one hand, it's surprising to me how, in seminary, so much of what I was reading was about missional church and changing the metrics and,
Right.
what does it mean to participate in the mission of God and how do we shift away from these traditional metrics? So cognitively, I think I've believed that for a long time. But then, like in actuality, the ways that shame can be kicked up if I don't
Yeah.
feel like I'm being successful, and I'm an
Hmm.
Enneagram 3, so that's
Okay.
a real tight connection between
Yeah.
like achievement and
Yeah.
worth and shame and all those things. So I was surprised, I think honestly, how much it would affect me and
Yeah.
and jar me. Um, I think there's also just some reflection around our desire for control as pastors and ministry leaders. And I remember talking to one of our mentors, he was a coach for us, and he was like, when you're trying to like grow a church, there's certain levers you can pull to
Yep.
try to help grow. And there's other levers that you could pull and we're not willing to pull them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's
Yeah.
just things that
Totally.
we're not willing to do. So I think sometimes that is tied to like fear and control and the ways that we want to try to make something beautiful happen, but it's coming through like control and fear and particularly controlling people's spiritual
Yeah.
journeys, which is not mine to control.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to release that, right? And just to let them be where they are and coax them along, as you said, seeing God where they are in their own lives and pointing that out. I think that's a huge role of what a pastor should be doing, but then not wanting to pull them along to where we think they should be in their spiritual journey and walk as well.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The life with God, does that come from Scott Jethani at all and his With God book?
Yeah, not originally, I don't think. I
Okay.
think it's more like Dallas Willard,
Okay.
some of the
Yeah.
people. But for sure. I mean, it's
Which
not
would be a downstream or upstream from me.
exactly,
You're
exactly.
like, I
Yeah.
go to the original source. So,
I know. I saw someone the other day comment on something. They're like, "Oh, like another church." They're like, "Oh, you got that from John Mark Comer," and
yeah.
for whatever reason, I wanted to be like, "And he got it from Dallas Willard."
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
reinterpreting it for each generation to be able to.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you guys started Nova, you were thinking dinner church.
Yeah, yeah.
Why? What was the draw and the pull on that?
Yeah, I think twofold.
Hmm.
Well, it was interesting because, previously I was serving at a church, another like historic downtown Presbyterian church in Colorado Springs, and that it was a good fit in a lot of ways. But I think while we were there, Chuck and I realized we started referring to ourselves as like bridge people
Hmm.
because we appreciated the rootedness, the historic church. I was on staff there, and Chuck started attending and became a member in part because he wanted to go to a church that had some
Oh,
history and some
yeah.
roots. He wanted something different than what he experienced before, which felt not as healthy for various reasons. So he wanted something that had like, yeah, some history to it. Um, but when we were there, I think we realized like we love that. And we were just like, oh, like there's these new apartment complexes being built all
Hmm.
around this church property. I don't know that they're going to ever come to one of our worship services. Like, how are we? So we started to realize we had a sort of like both and
Yeah.
um, passion or conviction, or we didn't want to choose one or the other.
Right.
And somewhere along the way, Chuck became acquainted with movements that try to hold that both and, especially in England, fresh expressions movement, the way that's been carried over to the US. So that really early on is what intrigued us to this role because it was
Yeah.
inherently a both and role to have the historic church and the church plant. So I think originally we were really drawn to that idea of an alternative type gathering designed with people in mind that aren't going to a normal church service, which is kind of funny because then we ended up creating a pretty conventional church gathering.
Yeah.
But through some coaching and discussion on because honestly, when we first got here, we were like fresh expressions model,
Hmm.
house church model, missional communities. Like we were drawn to all of those in different
Yeah.
ways. Um, but we ended up because we're also drawn to like liturgy and the way the
Yeah.
Spirit forms us through liturgy. And as we come to the table, the Lord's table each week,
Hmm.
we ended up going that route and really intentionally included snacks and meals and
Yeah.
food as part of our worship gathering.
Did you have people sitting around tables at the beginning? Am I remembering that right?
It's funny, not every week,
Okay.
but we would like mix it up sometimes in the beginning or we would have like the whole thing be a dinner, or we would be around tables and have a short time of like worship and song and some
Hmm.
liturgical pieces and then go right into the meal.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. But you still do monthly dinners.
Right. Yeah.
So
So
what's the keystone of that for you guys?
I think in large part it was that sense of it's really easy to walk into a worship gathering as an individual
Hmm.
and participate as an individual and walk out as an individual.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, how are we actually forming community here? Like, how are we very intentional with that? And so, honestly, in the beginning, part of the design of the room, it wasn't a full like worship in the round. It was more of like a kind of half circle, but
Yeah.
wanting to even the physical space to model that. And then with dinner too, like this is part of our worship as
Yeah.
well as gathering around tables.
You're not in the traditional sanctuary with
Right.
Nova, correct? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an old fellowship hall that we updated and
Hmm.
kind of converted to the space
Hmm.
that was. Yeah.
So, in setting up tables, inviting people around, what was the theological conviction around that, if there was one? Did you have one?
Oh,
I'm sure
yeah.
you did.
Yeah. Nah. Oh, I mean, I think just I remember you would probably know this quote. I'm gonna misquote it. I think it is it Tim Chester who has that book Meals with Jesus,
Hmm.
and I think it's Tim who says like in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is either like going to a meal, at a meal, or coming from a meal.
Yep.
And so I think that was a key idea, like in our heads, of how are we incorporating food and meals. Like our leadership team, our Nova leadership team, we meet once a month and we
Hmm.
have dinner together. And
Yeah.
then we do spiritual practices together. And then we get into like the things we need to discuss and discern. But I think as much as possible, we try to include food in what we do. And so that was just that idea of like, one, the way that Jesus made that such a key part of his ministry.
Hmm.
And just we believe like how that draws people together, how that forms relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. How's that changed the makeup of, most of the session meetings or leadership meetings that I've been a part of are, let's get down to business. We have an agenda. We have a thing to do. How's that changed that time for you?
Yeah, I so we started this leadership team a little over 2 years ago.
Okay.
Previously, as a church plant, we didn't yet have internal leadership. And one of the first things we did was read Ruth Haley Barton's book on like spiritual leadership and
Okay.
community.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think from the get-go, trying to say like this church leadership team is not like a board of directors. Like
Yeah.
we're not like I'll say this to them sometimes, like y'all are brilliant, humble, wise leaders, but it's not about like our best thoughts, you know, like it's
Hmm.
about starting God's will. And so I do think from the beginning, try to like set that mindset and culture, even within the leadership team, that like we're going to take up spiritual practices together. And so when we gather, we do it once a month, but it's like 3 hours
Yeah.
um, because it's dinner and then that, and then the things we need to talk about. But I think a large part of it is because what do we mean by leaders, spiritual leaders of a church? Like,
Yeah.
what are we even talking about? Like, what does that need? What does that mean? And therefore, what practices will we take up together?
Yeah. What have you guys arrived on a definition of what that is?
Not like a formal, like not like something that's written down, but just that idea of like we are discerning God's will
Yeah.
together. We are
Okay.
trying to
Yeah.
discern the mission that God has for us.
Yeah. That sounds terribly inefficient.
Yeah.
Sounds like it goes against all of our American values of how we should
Yeah.
be running an organization.
Yeah. And I think there is some tension. I think this is where you get into like the beauty and diversity of the body of Christ. Because, yeah, I mean, we have had conversations with our leaders where they're like, okay, well, here's the um, clarity we need, or here's the follow up we need, or here's the action items we need to know are happening. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
think leaders have spoken to us too of like, and spoken into our lives and our leadership of, here's what we need you to work on. And
Yeah.
so I think there is a tension there of, um, if we're only sitting around eating dinner, doing Lectio Divina together,
Yeah.
um, that's probably not great.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think there's a tension.
Is there more trust in the relationships that you have with the leadership team, do you think? Or how has it formed those relationships?
Is there more trust
Like
because
between you and maybe not the whole thing and maybe not just the individuals, but is there a deeper relationship or more trust there? Do you guys feel like you hear each other more?
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I mean, I think
Yeah.
some of it is the leaders themselves are
Hmm.
very emotionally aware and attentive, to their own like inner dynamic. I mean, they're very emotionally intelligent people,
Yeah.
so that's going to build a lot of trust,
Yeah.
obviously.
Hmm.
Um, there are people that like we're friends with. I mean, there is this sense of, oh, I actually feel like seen and known by you as we're doing this work together.
Hmm.
But I also think there's like the history of it, of the way that we have engaged in maybe discernment questions or things we needed to figure out because of the way that people showed up and did really say, like, hey, here's my preference, or here's maybe a fear that I can feel lingering in the background of this conversation. I'm going to
Yeah.
name it and try to like release that. And the way, so I think because of the history of doing these discernment processes well,
Yeah.
builds that trust too.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
talking about these things, they're not just like, oh, we should do God's will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's a commitment to try to live this out together.
Hmm. And you're talking about the fears and the emotions that you carry into that as well.
Yep.
What it does the table have something to do with that? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's
Hmm.
funny because like you said, like, oh, it's not efficient, right? And
Hmm.
that kind of goes back a little bit to our conversation around like trusting the process and
Yeah.
like I'm just quickly falling back on established metrics,
Yeah.
it feels like nothing is happening. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it can feel like, um, and I think that's why Jesus is like, hey, look, like the seed is buried
Yeah.
and something is happening. You know what I mean? Like, um, I do think it can feel like nothing's happening if you're
Right.
just eating a meal, but trusting that there is growth and life and relationships being formed. So
Hmm.
I do think it makes a difference, but I think in the moment it doesn't always feel that way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm. What you said in our earlier conversation, I love is we're participating in the life of the Trinity and just
Yeah.
having an attentive, open life and moving toward people.
Yep.
Yeah, and you said that around just having dinners on a monthly basis, and I find that incredibly beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of the with God life. It's
Hmm.
with the Trinity.
Yeah.
And the life and love shared between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is what we're invited into and to participate in. I think that's been a maybe like maybe when we set out to plant Nova, Chuck and I really emphasized the missional aspect. And I think the way the Lord has grown us has been that fusion with the spiritual formation aspect. And
Yeah.
it's all, I mean, it's all one and the same in a lot of ways, but
Right.
that's what we're getting at of, okay, what does it mean to participate in the life of God? And
Hmm.
that includes
Yeah.
lingering over a meal together,
Hmm. As
leaders.
I mean, you pointed out, we obviously were talking about food and tables, but then you said the ordinary life and seeds that are kind of being cultivated and kind of hidden work that
Yeah.
God is doing. There seems to be a can I say that? A new emphasis on kind of the ordinary, everyday things that Jesus used in his parables and how he did his ministry. I don't even know what my question is, but what what has been the move for you guys in that, and how has that affected your congregation?
One of our staff members recently kind of reflected back about Nova that we trust the simple.
Hmm.
And I think as she was unpacking that, she did mean like we're trusting Jesus to be present and at work in the simple, and that can be a stripped down worship gathering. That can
Hmm.
be the simplicity of a meal. All those things that I think is reminding us like to take a deep breath and Jesus is here and Jesus is at work. And like you said, when you look at the ministry of Jesus, both in terms of like what he taught, like the parables he told, but in his actual ministry, like the beauty and simplicity. I know the whole like I'm pretty sure we've talked before about like the Godspeed
Yeah.
documentary.
Hmm.
Um, but that idea of like, the speed of love and like,
Yeah.
so that's where like, again, missional and spiritual formation, because it's like, am I slowing down enough um, to notice? Am I slowing down enough to notice what's going on inside of me? Am I
Hmm.
slowing down enough to be present with someone? Am I slowing down enough to value a meal with my leaders and not just like, oh my gosh, our agenda is so long tonight. Like we don't like no dessert, no dessert. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I trust the simple things and that
Hmm.
Jesus is there.
Has that changed your family life, having three boys, and what meal times look like? And because I think as you were talking, I was thinking, we tried to do. I want to pray with my family at around the table. It seems to be a natural time that we could do that together as a whole. We pray with our kids as we put them to sleep as well, but. And the first time we were going about doing it, like it was late. We sat down at the table later than we wanted to. Their energy was insane. Um, I'm ready to get them to bed, and like I have all the anxiety and anger. Mainly, my anxiety comes out as anger, but like all of that dad, energy coming out and going like, never mind, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But Stacey thankfully was like, no, this is good. We should do this. But has that changed? Doing ministry like this, has that shifted your parental and family life?
Well, it's funny though, because the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that, like, is our meals are so scattered with
Hmm.
our kids, and we hit this point recently where we were like, okay, we really want to. I mean, we live like in a two-bedroom apartment with
Okay.
three boys, and
Yeah.
like our kitchen table is storage, is our shelf, all those things. So we recently were like, okay, we want to be intentional about this. Let's start with one night. So we
Hmm.
we try to Sabbath on Fridays.
Yeah.
Friday night, like let's have this meal with our kids. And so I think maybe okay, when you first asked that, I was like, "Oh my gosh. No, like we're terrible with meals with our kids, right?"
Yeah.
But then I was like, "Oh, but we're trying to start where we can
Yeah.
and be intentional in that like that little like one meal. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like out of the 21, like one
Yeah.
meal. And I do think that's something of the culture we're trying to create at Nova is
Hmm.
I could go to like guilt and like self-contempt of like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, we're terrible parents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, wait. Is there an invitation from Jesus for something new in my family?
Yeah.
And where can I start with a practice that helps me embrace that and live into
Yep.
that? And be curious about these other 20 meals, what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, we're um, eating five different meals because my kids are really picky and we're going in different directions and all that. Anyways, I do think there's something there that I am learning of like listen for the invitation from the
Hmm.
spirit, but not with a spirit of oh, I shouldn't be doing this or I should be doing this, but a
Yeah.
spirit of like, curiosity to
Yeah.
see what is an embodied practice that you could take up to try to
Yeah.
live it
Hmm.
invitation.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And it does, it begins, let's do one and
Yeah.
slowly add
Yeah.
as much as you can and making that possible. I think all of life just rails seemingly against a family meal together on a daily basis, and it's like, I think Monday night we were trying to all sit down at the same time, and it was. But I had to run the band practice. Michael had guitar lessons, and Joshua didn't come to the table at all, our youngest, and so it was like. Stacey was like, "Well, I tried." I'm like, "We did try. It was what we
Totally.
were hoping for." So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So Chuck does most of the liturgy, right, and has designed that. So what is your weekly kind of worship rhythm look like at Nova?
On like a Sunday night.
Yes. So
Yeah.
so Sunday night.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks walk in, and we pretty early on made a big deal about snacks and having
Hmm.
all the snacks and drinks out as soon as people arrive.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. One of my friends who's a church planter came to visit Nova, and she was like, "Oh, I love that you have snacks out first, like you would at your home."
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times in church spaces, you have that fellowship hour
Right. Right.
after.
Afterwards. Yeah.
So people come in, there's snacks, there's drinks. You will constantly, we joke, like throughout the service, you can hear the pop of the LaCroix can as people are opening their drink
Yeah.
or going to get more snacks. Um, we follow, call to worship. We'll either have prayer of confession or prayers of the people. Fairly early on, one of our folks in the community said, I think we should do passing of the peace
Yeah.
to try to move people towards each other within the gathering of worship, not just
Yeah.
beginning or end. And when we look back, we feel like that practice actually was really formative
Yeah.
for people literally moving towards each other.
Yeah.
Um, I do think a big part of our gathering is trying to explain the practices, not just for those. This goes back to the people in these different thirds and
Hmm.
maybe the kindness or the grace they've experienced. So when we explain prayer of confession, when we explain passing of the peace, it's both trying to help maybe those who don't know what that is,
Yeah.
but also people who have this thought of, oh, this is the time to heap shame on myself as I confess my sins or whatever. So we really intentional in trying to explain maybe some like more healed, I don't know,
Hmm.
that's right, like ways of understanding these
Yeah.
practices.
Reframing it for sure.
Yep. Yep.
How do you like prayer confession? How do you intro that or explain that?
Yeah, we frequently will say something like, this is not about heaping guilt and shame upon ourselves.
Hmm.
This is about coming out of hiding
Yeah.
and being honest with God, trusting that God meets us here with mercy and grace.
Yeah.
And then we'll do like a written prayer of confession and then give time for individual. And that's become something we've leaned into more and more as well, is time for silence.
Yeah.
Um, from the beginning, we wanted to have a time of response after the sermons that folks could consider what God is saying to them. In the beginning, I think it was a little more creative the way we would
Hmm.
do it, whether that was like a handout or like an image to kind of sit with. Now we tend just to like give silence and say like listen for what the Spirit is bringing up
Yeah.
for you.
Hmm.
But that sort of like contemplative space has been incorporated more and more over the years.
Yeah. What took you to that? Because that's not most church experiences, right? Like it
Yeah.
is. We're going to do a song of reflection, or we're going to do something like that, and most of our life isn't silent. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a great question. I think it both was probably what Chuck and I were being drawn to
Hmm.
in our own life with God, but then also that sort of like resistance to um, always loud, always moving.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny. Like, I was kind of curious to ask you, like, and these things that we value and want to see happen in the church, how we want to grow as disciples, you feel like the winds of resistance in so
Yeah.
many ways, whether that's broader culture or church culture.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, it's like, how do we
Which
actually
wins? So you chuckled. Which wins are stronger? Do you think?
yeah, yeah. I don't in this case the like the loud content driven can't catch your breath. I don't know which wins are stronger.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yep.
what do you think?
It's pretty even. I think there's a different pressure on us as ministry professionals, and when it comes to the winds of what culture is,
Yeah,
or sorry, what the winds of what church is bringing, and
yeah,
feeling. One of the questions I had was like, what are there any pressures that you're feeling? Are there any winds from like the denomination or elsewhere that you're in, or people that are kind of going, come on, plant this church or whatever? But like, I have felt that in our life and ministry, and I felt some release from that recently. But it's still there, still like that
yeah,
voice of the people that we value their voice, or they've been a strong voice in our life for negative reasons as well. Kind of going like, is this really what you're doing right now, or needing to have something because of what our culture, and I mean both inside and outside the church, is how it normally functions in this as well. So,
so what winds of resistance have I felt
well,
particularly
so
like?
I'm saying yes. I think there's both of that. But
Yeah,
do you get maybe more pressure for like, hey, you guys, pick up your pace, quit waiting on God.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, one I'll say I have this like amazing group of friends. Um, you know, most of them are pastors in our denomination. One of them is a coach of pastors, but I think that has been huge. And I think we've talked about this before. Like when you have friends or just fellow people in ministry that you can be like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like,
Hmm.
should keep
Yeah,
going
absolutely. Yeah.
because we're trying to do the same thing and we're
Hmm.
seeing the same winds of resistance, but we're
Yeah.
like, nope, nope, this is good, keep going. So I
Yeah.
think for sure having people around me that are seeing the things I'm seeing or desiring the things I'm desiring in terms of a local church has
Hmm.
been a huge gift when you are like, wait, what are we doing? Like, is
Yeah.
this, or, whatever it is
Yeah.
that stressors or anxieties that come up, like
Hmm.
having people going different contexts, different cities, different
Right.
states, but
Yeah.
trying to do something similar, broadly speaking, is a huge gift.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you have that. That's good. That's good. The so back to liturgy. You guys have prayer, confession. You're explaining it. You have the passing of the peace, and which turns people towards one another and
Yep.
worship. And I think you said that they can recognize each other because usually
Yeah.
we're all facing one
Yeah.
direction. Oftentimes, has there been pushback in that from what I always hear as well, the introverts? And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, they actually want to be a part of something. They just don't get their energy from you. You know.
Hey, I have not heard any pushback around that moment,
Oh,
the
good.
passing of
Yeah.
and I think even like to be able to say like this is how we'll intro it
Hmm.
a lot is, there's so many voices speaking over us. There's so many
Yeah.
voices speaking anxiety and insecurity. And like we actually believe like when I get to say to you, Mark, the peace of the Lord be with
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
Like there's a spiritual reality to that when I get to
Yeah.
speak like peace and the name of Jesus over you. So I think we'll say sometimes too something like Jesus calls us, to be peacemakers in the world, but we get to actually like practice that reality
Yeah.
for a few minutes as we gather. Like we're gonna go out wherever God has us
Yeah.
and try to do it that way, but we get to like try it on right now
Yeah.
and speak peace over each other. So kind of incorporating it both into like the wider mission, but
Yeah.
also like the reality. Like no, this isn't like perfunctory. Like what's the word? I don't know that
Perfunctory.
word. Perfunctory, that word.
Yep. Yep.
Like Jesus is here. Like we're actually
Yeah.
like participating in this
Hmm.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's not surprising. I was going to make a joke, but like the liturgical practices that we have are
Yeah.
shaping our people and how they interact with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you do communion every week as well.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Do you have a particular way that you guys have done that, or what was your conviction of doing that?
I think a lot of what we, have been talking about both in terms of how central the table is
Hmm.
to the life and ministry of Jesus and Jesus like breaking bread with the disciples and then their eyes were opened, or like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
those kind of things of how vital it is, how key it is to our own life with God. And again, there's that sort of like, hey, what we're doing here,
Yep.
this is the Lord's table, this is communion, this is, sacrament, but there's something of what we're being invited into and how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
Um, that we can build those connections and understand that like that integration of my
Yeah.
life with God, that what we're doing here spills out into the world. And I think too, honestly, I mean, I love it. I love doing it because when I'm done with my sermon, if
Hmm.
I'm then leading people to the table, that
Yeah.
just feels such a like beautiful response to God's word. And
Yeah.
there's that sort of like we did want it to be um, that sort of I'm not just hearing something and walking out the door,
Yeah.
but what is Jesus saying to me, to us? And so I
Hmm.
think that very tangible, physical, get out of your seat, come to the table,
Yeah.
receive. We're doing it together, right? And it's
Yeah.
everything we've
Yeah.
been talking about so far. You're not just individual walking in, an individual walking out.
Yeah.
Like we're coming to the Lord's
It's an
table.
embodied practice, incarnate practice right away. I love that you framed it as like, this is, you didn't say first, but the first response
Yeah.
that we have to the word is to come
Yeah.
and then feast on the word and sit at the table,
Yeah.
metaphorically, with Christ. That just reframes. That's reframing things for me. Um,
Hmm.
of that being like not like the first response isn't be less greedy or change your sexual ethic or whatever, change this part in your life or have more devotionals in the morning, but it's come and
Yeah.
be at the table with Christ. That's incredibly beautiful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I've never thought of it just like how you said it. I never thought of it that way, but like, yes, how beautiful of like, we want to jump to like, how do I apply this
Yeah.
to my life? And like, what am I supposed to do? What am I,
Hmm.
and it's like, come and receive and be fed
Hmm.
and find your spot at the table. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. How has this influenced the rest of your congregational life? You do monthly dinners. You have dinner every the Lord's table every week. You said even in the summers you do you know,
Yeah.
tables as well together. What does life of Nova look like outside of Sunday evenings?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of, even lately, we've tried to really encourage people, invite each over, invite, people over for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
invite each other over to your home. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
just the simplicity of keep moving towards each other, keep going on hikes and all those things. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's been a more recent emphasis is like, yes, as a church community, we're going to set the table sometimes in
Yeah.
really intentional, like more formal ways. Um, but let's just keep moving towards each other as a congregation, especially if we've had like new people and all that. Like, how do we
Yeah.
keep sort of, I want to make this part of my life where I'm just moving towards people
Yeah.
all the time, particularly, around food.
Yeah.
So we have done things, the more intentional organizational side. We've called them like table groups, where it's been like a one-time gathering for
Mm-hmm.
dinner in someone's home, sharing a meal. And
Yeah.
that's maybe some games, but other than that, like
Yeah.
that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we do a lot over the summer in terms of park hangouts because
Yeah.
where we are, we're located really close to some of major parks in Denver,
Beautiful
and so
parks in Denver.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so we'll do like we just finished worship, we're gonna walk over to the park and play
Mm-hmm.
volleyball. I kind of laughed in the beginning when we were first starting because some of our first purchases was like a communion table, a volleyball net, cornhole. Like I was like, all right,
Yeah.
like but I do wonder too. I was thinking, I am an external processor,
Yeah.
which I don't know if it's good or bad on a podcast.
It's great. I love it.
But I don't know, starting Nova, I'm not sure if it was like more of the missiological conviction or if it was the like, I'm just tired.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I previously, was serving in a very like programmatic
Yeah.
church. And so I do think we leaned more towards like the trusting the simple, like
Yeah.
have a meal together. We're gonna go play kickball in the park. Like not highly, a lot of programs, but
Right.
just trying to say like, here's the simple things we know to do,
Mm-hmm.
like incorporating food
Yeah.
and trusting that that does something to build community.
Mm-hmm. Has it changed expectations, or has it confronted people's expectations of what a church should be doing programmatically?
I think at times, I mean, I
Yeah.
think especially like I remember in the beginning, someone came a few times, I think, and they were like, y'all don't do anything. Like they were like, you don't have anything going on. And some of it was we were just new and getting
Yeah.
started. And I think I was maybe pregnant. I can't remember. Like
You're like, I am growing a child right now.
yeah, we're doing a lot.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah.
I do think some of that is the age that we were as a church. I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
development, But I do think, yeah, sure. There's a sense of sometimes of maybe what people are used to, or
Mm-hmm.
but on the whole, here's my theory.
Yeah.
I think people are tired. I think people are stretched really, really thin, and so I
Mm.
think on the whole, it's been like a blessing to people to embrace this sort of like way of church life that's not demanding. You're
Ooh.
constantly
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It feels like you're giving people space to be human.
Yeah.
And then Eugene Peterson always contrasts, or not contrasts, but pulls together prayer and play. And he says, especially, I love the structure of like, we do worship and then we go to the park. And so we come before God and we form ourselves as a community, we form ourselves as individuals, and then, which is praying and seeing what God is doing, and then going and playing is allowing God to be God in that space. That holds something that I think really even the culture of Denver, which loves to play, but doesn't really do it like it's fitting in very tight margins of the rest of their life as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think just in our conversation, thinking about the things that we might embrace
Mm-hmm.
that do ask us to let go of like efficiency and productivity.
Yeah.
So that if that's meals, if that's play, certainly like you get into like Sabbath and rest, like there's
Yeah.
these things that confront these notions that I definitely carry within myself that like I always need to be producing.
Yeah.
And they're inviting us, kind of like we're saying too, like, is this mission about us
Yep.
or is it God?
Yeah.
God's, like,
Yeah.
am I participating or am I carrying
Yeah.
all of this?
Hmm. You said in our earlier conversation, setting a table is not dictating an agenda. And I love that openness of going, we're here to see what God is going to do. We're not going to put that on, other people or
Yep.
on ourselves even, but
Yep.
we're going to have our eyes and ears open to see and hear what God is doing in this place. I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Because I think even in that statement, it does capture again. There's two things that are true at
Hmm.
once.
Hmm.
I do think Jesus is asking us to set some tables, right?
Yeah.
You think about, I don't know, like I'm not like, here, eat this bite.
Right.
I'm not like that would be like treating people like kids, like
Yeah.
little kids.
Hmm.
I mean, like you need to eat some, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I still do
um,
that with my 6-year-old. So.
yes, yes. So I do we have roles to
Yeah.
play. Well, we're setting tables, but there is that again that control and
Hmm.
fear and all those things that would make me want to start like force feeding
Oh
somebody in
yeah.
their journey.
Uh huh. Yeah. That's really wonderful. Katie, I'm so grateful for this conversation and partnership and ministry in Denver and this beautiful city. I love that you guys are what you're doing and committed to it and loving people well downtown
Yeah.
in that corridor. Thank you so much. Thanks for
Thanks, Mark.
joining us today.